Hi, my name's Sheehan and today I'd like to talk about the book of Genesis, the first book of the Old Testament of the Holy Bible, the first book of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, the Torah as the Jewish faith calls it. And I'd like to just go through this book from the Bible, exploring how it's put together, the structure, as well as some of the themes that crop up. Now, no one knows when it was written, of course. It seems likely that it was put together with the rest of the Pentateuch around about 500 BC, after the Israelites returned from exile in Babylon and I guess were free to reassert their identity again. Although the stories are undoubtedly ancient, stretching back thousands of years, it's here that these stories are put together in some coherent whole, and not in a haphazard way either. There's certainly a rhyme and reason to how this material is assembled. And of course, from the documentary hypothesis onwards in the 19th century, it's been common to regard Genesis has been written by, or at least compiled by, a few different people, which can be seen in the text itself, how there are different focuses and different linguistic styles between different authors. The Genesis is structured in basically 2 parts, a very kind of zoomed out way of looking at it. From chapter 1 to chapter 11 we have the Primeval History. That's the creation, stretching all the way up to Noah and the flood. And then the focus in the second part switches to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then a story about Joseph, one of Jacob's sons, which closes Genesis. And within this large-scale structure, of course, we have, in the primeval history, we have the very beginnings of life itself, 2 accounts of the creation. The first one, which goes through each of the days, with God resting on the 7th day. The second creation story having more of a human focus through Adam and Eve. And then we move on to the fall, in that remarkable story of Adam and Eve choosing their own way and taking the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in essence allowing sin to enter into humanity, which of course resonates through the following chapters. Cain killing Abel. We have more examples of human wickedness and hubris, which of course centres on the story of the flood, where God in his wrath wipes out life, humans and animals, but preserves a remnant through Noah and his family on the ark. Of course, then God makes a covenant with Noah that he will not do this again. And we have a kind of mirror image story, Tower of Babel, which I guess forms a pair either side of the flood story with the story of Cain and Abel, again about human pride. And we also have various genealogies, chapter 5 of Genesis being the classic example. Then we move into the second part of Genesis, the patriarchal history, which is very different in style. Here we have several stories focused on Abraham and his calling out of the Ur of the Chaldees, eventually into Canaan, and the various promises God makes, a covenant God makes with Abraham. Then Isaac as well, and there's much repetition between some of these stories. And then Jacob. Again, the promises of God reiterated. And the last, in a rather substantial part of Genesis, right at the end of the book, we have Joseph, mistreated and abandoned by his brothers and of course sold into slavery into Egypt. But then Joseph eventually forgiving his brothers and seeing his father again, Jacob, and inviting him into Egypt, which sets us up, of course, for Exodus, where the Israelites have become numerous in Egypt. So what are we to make of some of the themes of this rich and hugely influential text? Of course, creation is a massive thing, isn't it? The first 2 chapters all about God creating the cosmos, the world, humanity, and it is good. That's reiterated, isn't it, throughout the first chapter. It is good. That's the theme of the goodness of God's creation. But then, of course, we have the fall, the theme of sin, which, of course, is a recurrent theme throughout the Bible. The sense that humanity is somehow putting themselves in God's place, which has all kinds of ramifications. And pretty much all of the classic sins are there from the beginning. Pride, wrath, lust, telling lies, greed, they're all there. But then the next theme in Genesis, of course, is the theme of rescue. The theme that despite humanity's wrong choices, which they've made in their freedom, of course, God wants humanity to be brought out of the predicament they find themselves in. So we have the story of Noah, who saves a remnant of humanity and of course the animals as well. But then we come with Abraham, God calling a people to be a blessing to all nations. This idea of God's rescue plan, to put it in a rather glib way. So Abraham, his descendants will be more numerous than the stars, of course. He is the one who will begin this rescue plan, starting from him and his family, which eventually becomes the people of Israel. To be a blessing to all nations, to bring humanity back to God. A holy people set apart to do that. Of course, for Christians, this rescue plan reaches its apex within the person of Jesus Christ. But this is the beginning of this theme in the theology of the Bible. Other lesser themes, I guess, are the idea of family, of identity, of land, of how peoples interact with those around them outside their communities. There's plenty about God's wrath, God's intolerance of sin. Of course, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is a famous example. There's also much about the younger brother, the lesser brother in many respects, being the one who receives the blessing to carry on the family line. We hear that, don't we, with Jacob and Esau, and then Manasseh and Ephraim. This theme that somehow the lesser one is the greater one, which of course resonates throughout the Bible, both the Old and the New Testaments. And there's also the beginnings of this theology of sacrifice as well. Famously, of course, of Abraham in that horrific story, when you think of it, of Abraham taking Isaac up the mountain to sacrifice him. As much about making particular areas holy by blessing them as well. So Genesis, of course, such an influential and amazing text, and you may think you're familiar with it, and I guess you are, many of you, but reread it again and think about what the writers really want to tell the audience about God and his creation and his love for his people, despite their turning away from him. Thank you for watching, and please check out the brief slideshow about the themes and structure of Genesis as well. Bye.